Now we're live.
Okay, so let's start off with our sponsors. Daf Yomi for the month is sponsored by Duvi and Tequila Catcher. B'schus Refuah Shlema for Ephraim ben Shifra. And Daf Yomi for the week. By the way, which month? Is it Teves or is it January?
It's Teves.
It's
like 30 days.
It's up until like 10th of...
Extend beyond, yeah.
Up until almost like Tu B'Shvat. We're going to go basically.
Yes,
All right,
yes.
good. And Daf Yomi for the week is sponsored by Brian and Michelle Schiffman, Le'ilui Nishmas Shaya Ben Yosef, Brian's grandfather. All right, Shana Sham Shabaliyah. Okay, we are the Amar of Yehuda Amar Rav, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines from the bottom of Amar Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda saying of Rav Tamar Bas Yifas Torah. So we're talking about all of David's children and the fact that he had this army of offspring that came from the ladies he captured in battle. One of the daughters of the ladies he captured in battle was Tamar. She was a Bas Yifas Torah. I think we may have covered this in the last time shiur, but we'll just run through it quickly again. Shenemar, the pasuk says, "Vasa daberno hamelech ki lo yimanani mimecha," that Amnon had a crush, more than a crush, on his sister David. They had the same father, Tamar, and he had gotten. We'll see this advice that he had gotten from his from his friend that he was going to pretend to be sick, and then Tamar would get sent in order to take care of him, and then he could have relations with her. But she is recommending, why don't we just go to David and we'll get married, right? The question is,
did he get punished for that?
He does, yes. He does indeed get punished for it. If Tamar was the daughter of one of his married wives, Havai Achsei, so then she would be his sister. Mihava Sharyale, how could she be permitted to marry him? Elishmamina Bas Yifas Torah, so we see she was a Bas Yifas Torah, therefore she was converted, hence she was not really related to Amnon in any way. Amnon Reya, Ushmo Yonadav ben Sham'a, Achi David. So Amnon had a friend, his name was Yonadav ben Sham'a. He was who was, I guess it was David's nephew, right? So Shema was David's brother. So Ish Chacham, he was a wise person. Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, Ish Chacham L'Risha, he was wise in bad things, right? He's the one who gave Amnon this advice in order to trick Tamar. Vayomer Madua ta kacha dal ben Hamelech, why are you so down? Vayomer lo Yonadav says Shechav al mishkachav v'haschel. So Yonadav gave him this advice. Lie down on your bed and be sick. Ad ve'asta le'enei kol habriya. So then she's going to come in and she's going to be able to heal you. Vatikach hamashres vatitzok lefanav. So she came in and she's making him these pancakes in order to be able to make him comfortable. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav she'asta lomine tigun. This is what this means. She was making some kind of fried food for him. That was the medicine. Everybody knows fried food makes you feel better. Right? I guess if the issue was depression, or that probably could work. Amnon son gedola me'od. Now, after Amnon assaults Tamar, then he hates her. Right? Then he decides he really hates her. So now, my time up, what is the reason? The answer is because during the assault, she used one of her hairs and she cut him in the organ so that he would be unable to have relations. Vechi nikshiralo ihi mayavda. So the question is, if he got injured during
castrated him?
Yes, that's right.
Castrated.
Yeah.
Not just cut. Okay.
Well, see, it's a krushivka. It just means that it was an injury enough that it would prevent him from having relations in the future. Right? I don't know if she had to, it was a complete severance package, but it was some kind of it was an injury
with her hair.
Yes.
Was it like a Bris 2.0 or was it worse than that?
It was probably worse than that. Yeah, it was worse than that. It was significant enough that it was.
And on her part, this was intentional.
Well, that's the question. It sounds at first like that's the Gemara's question is, so fine, so he got hurt, but is that her fault? Why should he get mad at her? Ella ema kashra lonima v'asa krushivcha. Rather, we actually say that it was intentional. This was her defense. She was taking care of herself, and that was how she was defending herself. Any is that true? Hadarish Rava, but how could that be the case? That she would have hair in that location in order to cause him pain when we know that V'had Darash Rava had the following drasha. My diksiv, what does the pasuk say when it says Vayatzu l'chashem b'goyim b'yafyech, that there was during the times of bracha about the daughters of Bnei Yisrael, that they were so beautiful and they would be known amongst the goyim. She'ein lahan libnos Yisrael los ar beis hashechi v'lo beis ha'erva. One of the things that was beautiful is that they did not have body hair. Right, not anything against the East German athletes, right? As they used to say that, right? They would, you know what I'm talking about, right? The Olympic athletes, anyway. The bottom line is that the ladies did not have any body hair. The women didn't have body hair, and that was considered to be an attractive thing, and that was one of the blessings that was the case by Bnei Yisrael, Benos Yisrael. So therefore, that being the case, how did she have hair in this circumstance in order to injure him? So Shani Tamar de Basifas Torah, the answer is, she's different. She was a daughter of a Yafas Torah. She wasn't the daughter of a Jewish lady, and hence didn't have the DNA or whatever it was that was preventing them from growing hairs. The Mefarshim asked the question, then, what happens to, like we have the rules regarding determining whether a woman is old enough to be an adult based on hairs, right? So what happens to those if it's true that by DNA, I guess it was before the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, that this was the DNA of Kahal Yisrael, that this body hair was not an issue for ladies? How does that work? And Mefarshim discussed that issue. But it's not an issue nowadays, and also Yafas Toar was different.
Is she not an automatic Bulgarians by 12 and a half? It required them to. Like, is it A or B, or is it A? Age
would not. Well, you'd have to have other simanim of some sort, right? Okay. You'd have to be able to have other simanim, correct? Because we had the discussion. Well, we talked about it slightly about what happens in islandess. Right, we had the islandess case, right? When she got to be 20 years old, then we can presume, right, that she wasn't going to ever have simanim and she could be an adult. Remember, we talked about somebody.
That was a male, I guess.
That was by a male, and it would work by a female also, because we were talking about contract sales when somebody's considered to be an adult.
Right. Since most people were not there when this happened, could she have used a knife? Because it seems a bit far-fetched that she has these magic powers, almost like a superhero, like a Wonder Woman deal. So.
Yeah. Fair question. I don't know, and in fact, there's nothing really in the pasuk that indicates that's exactly what happens.
A razor in the dark would do this same.
Yeah. So she says the pasuk all says that how do we know this happened? This happened because she was hated by Amnon after the fact, right? That she injured him. How do they know that the method of the method was with a hair? So I would suggest. We have a principle when it comes to agadas, that the agadatos, that the actual details or truth of the incident is not important, right? Okay. The relevance of that it may not have occurred exactly in the way that the agadata mentions, but every detail of the agadata is intentionally made up for a purpose. As my brother was wont to say when asked, he said he tells a lot of stories at camp, and people ask him, "Is that a true story?" And he'd say, "I only make up true stories." So this is the same idea. This is more like a made up true story, right? Where it's like the elements of the story are factual. Now the question could be asked. What is the relevance of her hair being the weapon that makes this relevant? So that's really what the question is. In other words, there seems to be an element that's here that says that having relations with her was in fact the poison of this relationship. It wasn't simply that she defended herself physically and hurt him. There was a point that was being made. It was also the fact that it was the relations itself that hurt him. So there's something more to it than that. And I think that's really what the Gemara is trying to convey rather than what the weapon was.
I was just going to say there's other factors that show a female's at a certain level of maturity.
Yes, that is correct. That's really where the Mefarshim start to answer that, yes, or that the hairs come and they fell out, or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that's what the Mefarshim discuss. But okay, just to mention that there was this characteristic of Bnei Yisrael, and it didn't apply to. Again, there was another proof that Tamar was a bas Yafas Toar. Vatikach Tamar Efer al Rosha. So she goes into mourning, right? She takes ashes and puts on her head. Al Rosha. Do we change the girsa here to? Uktones hapasim asher haleha kar'a, and she ripped her garment that she was wearing in mourning. Tana mishmei Rabbi Yeshua, we learn the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. Geder godol godra Tamar be'osashah. Tamar set a boundary, an important boundary for Klal Yisrael at that moment. Amru livnos melachim kach libnos hadyotos achas kam v'kam. This is a disgrace for people of high status. So then you can imagine how a disgrace it would be for people that are of regular status. In other words, a king's daughter can live this down. Right? At the end of the day, she still has high status, and she's not going to get lowered in society based on the fact that she was assaulted. But nevertheless, she was embarrassed and went into mourning and made a public, was a fact that she was that she was I would say that she stood up for against assault. Right? She made a public declaration against it, and so too, this is the way that how embarrassing this is and degrading it is for regular women as well. And imlitznius kach, and if somebody who was a modest woman, so this is how embarrassing it was. So for prutzos also, they would also consider you have to be as if somebody who's modest, this can happen to. So you can see how somebody who is immodest, for sure, this can happen. So you have to be.
Daughter, who's known as a princess. Do you have more respect for her? Or do you have treat her like a?
So that was my issue when I read this Gemara. My issue was that it bothered me that seems to be that if you're more honored, something like this happening to you, you have more to lose, right? That would be a bigger story than if you were just somebody regular. And I think that, since thinking about this Gemara a little bit more, potentially their comment is that assault can happen to anybody, right? Or that in other words, if you're the daughter of the king and you're a modest person and do all the right things, and still you can get assaulted, so you can also imagine what it would be like for regular people. You always have to be careful, and I guess maybe that's a public safety announcement of sorts or something like that. But
David could have killed him if he wanted.
And he does get killed, but he gets killed by one of her brothers.
Oh, okay. Right. Or family.
Yeah, family member does. Amar Ravina Marav. Be'osa Shah Gozru al Hayichud. Val Pnuya. We have switched to Chaf Aleph Amid Beis. So that moment, they made a rule. The rule that they added they added a rabbinic enactment that a man and a woman cannot be alone together. Right? Because that was the problem. This is where yichud comes from. Right? And also on unmarried lady. Right? That you can't be alone with an unmarried lady. Rabbi Yochanan says name Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotzadok, Remez liyichud min haTorah minayin. Where is the hint at the prohibition of a man and a woman being alone together in the Torah? Where is that? Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Ki yasitcha achicha benimecha v'chi. So he says, if somebody who is your brother who has the same mother as you will entice you to worship avodah zarah. So the question in this, the pasuk is talking about that you might have a relative who might get you involved with avodah zarah. So you've got to be careful with those kinds of circumstances. So the Gemara asks, "V'chi ben aim mesis ben av eno mesis." Why is the Torah more concerned that the brother that has the same mother as you will entice you to avodah zarah rather than the brother who has the same father as you? Clearly, any brother could be your relative and maybe be somebody who you look up to and could entice you to do avodah zarah.
Maybe this brother went off the D or whatever.
Yeah, but why the mother versus the father? That's the question. Why the mother versus the father? Elalomar loch ben misyachid im imo ve'ein acher misyachid im kol arayos sheba Torah. So he says, well, but the reason why is to tell you that if you have a brother from the same mother, then you could be in the same house. Right? That's no issue. But if you have a brother from the same father, that means one of you has a different mother than the mother that's currently living in the house, which means yichud becomes a problem in that circumstance. And so, therefore, if yichud's a problem, you two brothers are not going to be hanging around together all that much. It's only because you have the same mother that yichud isn't a problem. Because the son and mother is the exception to the rule of being in yichud with an erva, with somebody who is prohibited to marriage. A mother and son is not a problem. Father and daughter, not a problem.
Is there a yichud problem if your brother's married and he has a daughter? Could that be, and go visit him?
Yichud is going to be a problem, yes, in that circumstance, right? Uncles but we're going to see that in a moment, right? The arayos are the primary problem, right? You can't be alone with anybody who you can't marry, right? Your father's wife, right? Who's your stepmother, for example.
Or your brother's wife, or whatever it is.
Brother's wife is another good example. These are rayos, these are prohibited relationships in the Torah, cannot be alone with them. So the question is, what are you talking about? You said that yichud got invented because of this circumstance. We see clearly from this indication, this pasuk in the Torah, that yichud was an issue even in the Torah days. Ella, rather, ema gozra yichud dipnuya. Rather, what we said is that in David's time, they expanded the prohibitions of yichud to include unmarried women. In other words, before, the prohibition was that you couldn't be alone with women, that if you had relations with them, it would be a prohibition from the Torah. But an unmarried woman, so there's no prohibition in the Torah of having relations with that person, so therefore you could be alone with them. However, because of the situation of Amnon and Tamar and the assault that occurred, so therefore they made a rule, now no longer, no unmarried people being alone together either.
Is that the Gezerah? Because it says here.
That's the Gezerah.
Yep.
That's the question.
It was a Deraisa.
That's correct.
Rabbi Yehuda said there was a.
Originally it was Deraisa, but the Deraisa, that's what Rabbi Yochanan, right? Rabbi Yochanan say that the Deraisa is with Arayos, with Arayos. But then the Derabanan is all women that you are that are not your wife.
And David made the exception in wartime. War women.
No, he didn't make that exception at all. That the Torah specifies and says these are people you're allowed to marry, right? It's like marriage. Imagine like there's no exception if a person gets married, right, and say, okay, now I can be alone with this woman because you're now married. You can be alone with them, right? So these are women who are captured in war. So the plus those are also non-Jewish women, but those women who are captured in war, the Torah specifically says you're allowed to marry them.
Because they're in need, obviously, most likely.
The women who are in war. Yeah, good question whether they have to go to the mikveh or not. That would have to review the halachos. But he's had relations at least once. Well, the question is because they come to your head. The way that's right. They had relations at least once. Correct. Now, tuma of nida, with non-Jews is generally not an issue. Right? So when it comes to lots of issues of tumah, we'll see in the Gemara in lots of different places, it is subject of machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos, a lot of different places and things. But generally speaking, impurity does not apply with non-Jews. So it wouldn't have the same kind of, may not have the same kind of issue. But I don't know this in detail, the halachos of Yifas Torah. Unfortunately, haven't studied them, but fortunately never had them applicable to me.
So that's like a complicated study as well.
Yeah.
Can be.
Okay, so now, Adonia ben Chagis misnase lemor. Nen, Adonia, who was one of David's sons, right? So he decides he wants to become king. At the beginning of Sefer Malachim, and David is getting old, and he has decided he's going to be the one who's next in line. So he said, Ani Amloch, I'm going to become the king next. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, Melamed Shabikesh Laholimo Velo Holamto. What he wanted to do is he wanted to put the crown of David HaMelech's crown on his head, but he was not able to.
That wasn't the right fit, proper fit?
That is exactly the point. So we have a tradition that the crown that Malchus-based David wore had a bar going across the inside of the crown. And those who had the hereditary lineage were appropriate for the crown had an indentation in their skull so that it would fit. And if it did not fit physically, then you were not appropriate for the kingship. So he tried to crown himself king. It did not fit. So Amarav, Malami Shabik, well, Vayaslo Rechavu Proshim. So what did he do? He made chariots and runners, 50 runners, Ish Ratzim Lefanov. My Ribusa. What's the big deal? So he had 50 guys running in front of him. He had like an entourage. What's the 50 guys? Not that much. So Amarav Yehuda Amarav, Rav Yehuda Amarav, Kulan Netuli Tchul V'Chakuki Kapos Raglav Hayu. These were special elite troops. They were ones that had their spleens removed and they had the bottoms of their feet altered. What they did was that, I guess when you start to run, you get an ache in your side. Yeah. So they had this removed so that they would be able to run great distances without pain. Wow. And they also had the bottoms of their soles of their feet removed so that the bone would be in contact with the ground so that they could run over distances without having any pain in the bottom of their feet.
Wouldn't that be like a Maris Ayin situation?
A Maris Ayin in what sense?
We were talking about the crown, right?
Yeah.
At the bar and
So he was doing the wrong thing. Adoniah is doing the wrong thing. Yes, he's trying to usurp the throne here. Yeah, that's right. So he's trying to usurp the throne. These are like Olympic runners. These are like the elites. Yep, it's a good question about body mutilations and whether it's intentional. Whether these were hired troops that were non-Jewish, it's a good question. But in any event, he found these elite soldiers and troops. If you got 50 of these guys were rare, right? So if you found 50 of these guys, so then that meant you were important. Okay, so now. It says in the Mishnah, Lo yarbe susim, lo yarbe lo susim. One of the things king can't do is he can't have too many horses. Ella kidei merkavto, all the amount of horses that he's allowed to have is enough for him to have for his army chariots. But kesef izov lo yarbe lo me'od, he can't have too much money. Ella kidei litain aspanya, the money in the treasury is supposed to be in order to pay for the army, right? You're not supposed to collect that much in taxes. Government purposes for defense, and therefore that is what you are supposed to be collecting for.
Reserve, basically.
Not supposed to have a tremendous amount of reserves, right? You're not supposed to be getting $100,000 food in France or whatever you do. No, it's good. V'kosev lo sefer Torah lishmo, and he should write a sefer Torah for himself. Yotze lemilchama motzia imo. When he goes to war, he takes this Torah with him. Nichnas hu, when he comes back, machnisa imo, he takes it home with him. Yoshev badin, when he goes to judgment, hu imo, he imo, the Torah is with him. Mesav, he kenegdo, when he goes to relax, he sits down, he's got the Torah with him. Shenemar's pasuk says, vayisa imo v'karlo bo kol yemei chayav. He has this Torah with him wherever he goes at all times, all the days of his life. Okay, says the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, lo yarbe lo susim. Let's talk about the horses. Yachal afilu k'dei merkavto. Since the pasuk says he can't have that many horses, maybe he can't even have them for his army chariots. Merkavto u parashov. I'm not sure what the difference between those two are, but there are two types, I guess, of the chariots that they would have for battle and for war. Lo mar lo. So therefore, the pasuk says for him, lo eno marbe aval marbe hu kedei richbo parashav. However, he can have for his chariots and I guess his war chariots. So hom mani makayim susim. So if that's the case, so then what does the pasuk tell me about horses? Plural susim habat lonim. So he says so mani makayim susim habat lonim. The answer is I cannot have horses that are idle, right? In other words, if it says you can have horses, so I got plenty of horses. Can't have too many horses. Sure you can. You can have hundreds of horses as long as they're for your chariots. So then what does it mean? You can't have too many horses. The answer is these are idle horses, right? You can't have pet horses, the kind that you have, like, they raise horses, right?
Or whatever.
Correct. Yeah, farm, you're right.
The Saudi Arabians.
Correct. The Saudis have it. Even the Queen of England used to be into breeding horses and things. It's a very royal thing to do, right?
The equivalent of collecting cars.
That's right. Collecting cars. That's what it was like. Yeah, exactly. So minayin shafiu sus echad hu batel shehu below yarbe. How do I know that if you even have one horse that is not for work purposes, that's prohibited? Tamalomer leman harbos sus. The answer is because you're not supposed to have, or in order to be able to, you're not supposed to go back to Mitzrayim, the pasuk says, in order to increase your horses. Now, below yarbe, susim lamali. If it says even one horse, you can't have too many of. So then, what does it mean? You can't have too many horses. Too many horses can't mean your war horses that you can have plenty of. Can't be talking about too many horses. Can't be talking about horses that are idle because you can't even have one of those. So what is going on here? So the answer is lavor belosa say alkus kolsus v'sus. The pasuk is telling us that every horse is a problem. Cannot have idle horses. So you think, okay, great, I've got 17 idle horses. I violated the commandment once. No, each horse is a violation of the commandment, and you cannot have that, and you cannot increase horses. Time of dechsiv rachmana lo. Now the pasuk says for him. They can't be for him. That's how we know they're idle. If it wasn't this, havamina afilu kedei richbo farashav nami, I would have presumed that it meant you couldn't even have any horses, right? If it didn't say for him, the problem is he can't have horses. The king can't have his own personal horses. But otherwise, I might have thought that he can't have them for his chariots either. So the answer is lo tzricha la'afushe. So he says. Second, what is that?
When Shlomo Melech did all these things. Do you not?
So the answer is that the pasuk is telling us that he cannot have, that he's allowed to have even many. That's what the pasuk is telling us, right? Right. If he can't have horses of numerous amounts for himself. but he can have plenty of horses. He can have as many horses as he needs for his chariots and for his army. That's how this works out.
Did Shlomo Melech go back to Mitzrayim and then Shlomo Melech
Yes,
gather horses?
he violates everything. We're going to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
He goes overboard. The kesef is av lo yar below. Next is that he cannot have lots of extra money. Ela kadei litain aspanya. Rather, all he needs is the amount of money that he needs for the troops. Taner rabban v'kesef is av lo yar below. He should not have extra money. Yachol afilu kadei litain aspanya. Maybe he can't even have enough money in order to pay the troops. Tamar lomar lo, it's for him. Lo et eno merubah. Marbe, aval marbe hul kedeli tinaspanya can have enough for his troops. Tama because of Rachman lo. The reason the pasuk says is for him. Halav hach, if it wasn't for that, havamina, I would have thought afilu kedeli tinaspanya, you couldn't even have enough money in order to pay for the troops. So nami lo tzricha leharvacha. The answer is no. Again, like we said, the same drush as the last time. It's only that he's not allowed to have excess. Hashad amart lo lidrosha. So now that we've got this low, we've now have this twice. He can't have it for him. He can't have horses for him. He can't have money for him. So now we know whenever it says for him, it means that this is specifically applies to the king. So lo yarbe lo noshim, my darashtabe. We went through before in the last Mishnah that he can't have too many wives, and it says lo for him, lo yarbe lo noshim. So what do we learn from that? We never talked about that. So the answer is Lemute Hedyotos, to tell us that the amount of wives, that is a problem for the king. That is not the same issue for non-kings, right? I guess if you're not a king, you can have more than 18 wives. This is a prohibition for kings only. Rav Yehuda Rami Ksiv, the pasuk contrasts the Rabbi Yehuda contrasts the following psukim. Vayilu Shlomo 40,000 arvos susim lemerkavto. On the one hand, it says that Shlomo had 40,000 stables of horses for his chariots. Uksiv Vayilu Shlomo 4,000 susim. Then it also says by Shlomo he had 4,000. Haketzad, how does this work? Im 40,000 itztablos hayu kol echad ve'echad hayu bo dalet alafim arvos susim. So he says if he had 40,000 stables, then each stable had 4,000 rows. Okay, the im dalet alafim itztablos. He had 4,000 stables. Hayu kol echad ve'echad hayu bo 40,000 arvos susim. Then he had 40,000 rows in each stable. Bottom line is he had 4,000 times 40,000 horse stables. Right, so he had a lot of horses.
That's a problem. That could be a problem on its own.
4,000 times 40,000?
Yes. So somebody want to do the
problem. That's a problem.
That is there. So you can see, so he had a tremendous amount of. Now that's horse stables. I'm not sure they were all full with horses, but it seems to imply that he definitely had.
160 million.
Yeah, that's a lot of horses.
160 million horses.
Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak Rami Ksiv. Rabbi Yitzchak contrasts the psukim. Ein kesef nechshav bimei Shlomo lim'uma. During Shlomo's time, the Bnei Yisrael were so wealthy that the money was worthless. Right. Basically, everybody had everything they needed. You didn't paying for things. The economy was so good that you could. There was, basically the trade was free. Uksiv, then it says Vayitin Shlomo as a kesef Yerushalayim kavonim. Then another pasuk says that the money was like stones, meaning it was just everywhere. But stones have some value, right? So nothing is not the same thing as a stone. So Lokash is not contradiction. The answer is things went downhill after Shlomo married the daughter of Paro, right? Things were originally before he married Bas Paro, everything was in great shape after Bas Paro. Then the economy took a slightly negative dip. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak v'shoshin nasa Shlomo as Bas Paro, when Rabbi Yitzchak says when Shlomo Melech married the daughter of Paro, Yared Gavriel came down from the heavens. V'natz kana b'yam, and he took a staff a reed and he planted it into the sea. V'hela sirton, and sediment started to gather around that. V'alav nivna krach godol sheberomi. That's where the great Roman cities were built. Right? So therefore, what happened was that Bas Paro, again, this is one of those these examples of the Agadita. Gavriel didn't take a reed and the sediment gathered, and that's where Italy comes from, right? What happened was that when Shlomo married Bas Paro, so she was a bad influence, and she brought with her even just the things, she wasn't bringing in real Avodah Zarah as much at the beginning, she brought in musical instruments that were used for Avodah Zarah.
So Gavriel's staff is one that started the Roman...
That's correct. So the day that Shlomo brought the daughter of Paro into the palace, therefore normalizing the use of things for Avodah Zarah into the culture of Bnei Yisrael, that planted the seeds for the eventual destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, which was destroyed for Avodah Zarah. And so, therefore, the establishment of Rome began the day that the establishment of the rise of Rome began on the day that David HaMelech did this. Now, keep in mind, the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed by the Babylonians, not the Romans. So this is even the right. This is like the second Beis Hamikdash, right? This is Shlomo HaMelech.
Okay.
Yeah. Rabbi Yitzchak, Mibnei Ma lo nisgalu tamei Torah. So why is it that Hashem doesn't tell us the reasons for all the mitzvahs in the Torah? Why doesn't he just tell us why we do everything we do? So the answer is Shtei Mikros Niskol Taman V'Nichshol Bahen Gadol Ha'olam. The answer is because there are 2 times in the Torah where Hashem tells us exactly what the reasons are, and the smartest guy in the world messed it up. Right? Ksiv, the pasuk says Lo Yir Belo Nashim. Torah says you shouldn't have too many wives, right? Because they may twist your heart. So Amar Shlomo says Aniyar Bev V'Lo Asuri. So Shlomo HaMelech said, no problem, I'll have wives and I won't. Right? It doesn't apply to me, right? How many times I said that doesn't apply to me? I'll be fine, right? Uksiv, and then the pasuk says, "Vahiles ziknas Shlomo noshav hatuas levava." When Shlomo got older, his heart was turned by his wives. Uksiv, then it says, "Lo yarba lo susim." He shouldn't have too many horses. V'amar Shlomo says, "Ani yarba v'lo ashiv." I'll have lots of horses, and I won't go back to Mitzrayim. It won't be a problem. So Ksiva teitzi merkava Mitzrayim b'sheshin. Eventually, he was exporting chariots of horses and things from Mitzrayim, and they were going back. So that is. Hashem knows what he's talking about. There's a reason, but Hashem doesn't tell everybody the reasons because human beings are like that. You tell me the reason, I know it doesn't apply to me, right? And I don't have to follow it. Then it says, "V'kosev Sefer Torah." He's got to write a Sefer Torah for himself. Tano bilvad shelo yisna'a b'shel avosov. He cannot use the Sefer Torah that his fathers used. He has to write his own. Amar Rav. Is it Rava? Do we switch it to? Hang on. Where's the Girsa change here? Chaf is. Something called Rabba. Yeah. So Rabba says, "Afapisha hinichu lo avosav le'adam sefer Torah mitzvah lechtov mishalo." And this is generally speaking. This is not talking about a sefer Torah for the king. This is generally every Jew has an obligation to write a sefer Torah. That you shouldn't take the sefer Torah that your parents gift to you. You should have a mitzvah to write your own. Shneimar, the pasuk says, "V'atak kisvu lachem es ashira," that you have an obligation. Everybody should write their own Torah. Esvei. So ask Abayas a question. Because it was sefer Torah lishmo, but the king writes it Sefer Torah for himself. Shelo yisna'eh b'shel acherim. He shouldn't use the one from other people. Melech in hed yolo. That seems to apply to the king. That's a rule by the king. The king can't use the Sefer Torah that was from others. But why can't anybody else? Lo tzricha l'shtei toros. This is to tell me that there's just two different Torahs, right? In other words, there are 2 psukim. One tells me that the regular Torah, everybody's got to write their own regular Torah. And then the king has a special mitzvah that he has to write a second Torah, and that one also he can't use the one from his parents. So continue like we're in a brisa. V'chasav lo es mishnah. He has to write the mishnah, the second one, the second Torah. That's how we're explaining this. Kosev lishmo. He writes it for himself. Shtei Toros. He writes 2 Torahs. Achas shehi yotzav v'nichnas imo. One that he's going to go out and wear and carry with him everywhere he goes. V'achas shemunachas lo bebeis ginozov. And the other one that he can keep in his personal library. Osa shehi yotzav v'nichnas imo. The one that goes out with him. So I'll read the parentheses, and the parentheses are included. The Marshal reads them, but others included. Osesa kamin kamiya. He makes the Sefer Torah like an amulet. V'tola bizro'o, and he ties it to his arm. Shenemar shivisi Hashem l'nagdi tamid. I put Hashem before me at all times. Kimimini bal emot. Now, so that means that according to this opinion, the Torah was like a small Torah, right? He wrote a little small Torah, and he tied it to it, carried it with him at all times. Okay, Eino nichnas ba lo lebeis hamerchatz. He doesn't go into the bathhouse with it. With it. Lo lebeis hakisi. He doesn't go to the bathroom with it. Shenemar v'aisim imo. It should be with him. V'kara bo. And we explain that it should be there, a makom haroy likros bo, only in a place where he can read from it. It's the only place you can learn Torah. The Torah does not go. You don't bring a sefer or Torah into a location where you cannot learn.
There's not a minimum size it needs to be?
No.
Okay.
Right? When we get to Baba Basra, which is quite an amount of time, we will see some potential ratios of size of height of Torahs to width of Torahs and things like that. But you can potentially write one that is very small. Okay. Right? Amar Mar Zutra. Ve'itema mar ukva betchila nitna Torah liyisrael bekis. This Gemara blows my mind. At the beginning, the Torah was given to the Jewish people with something called Ksav Ivri, ve'lashon hakodesh, and in lashon hakodesh. Chazar v'nitna lehem b'mei Ezra. It was re-given to them during Ezra's time. Bechsav Ashuris, with the writing of Ashuris, ve'lashon Arami, and in the language of Arami.
Lashon Ashuris is considered Lashon Arami.
Ksav
language,
Ashuris,
the language.
Ksav Ashuris, and the Lashon Arami is a different language.
Those kind of like Roman
Savage.
numbers or characters.
Okay, this is Ksav Ivri. Okay, this is Ksav Ivri. The language that we have, the letters that we have, these are Ksav Ashuris. Okay, so if you take a look at archaeological digs from Ir David and from all around that era, if you take this handy, and I did when we go to the Israel Museum, you can read, literally it's real Hebrew, you can read the inscriptions on everything and understand the simple Hebrew because it's all the exact same language, just the letters are different. So it's kind of very interesting.
Why do we change them up?
Oh, it's a good question. I'm glad that you asked that. Okay, so originally the Torah says this is what, right? Originally Mar Ukva is saying that the Torah was originally given with Ksav Ivri and Lashon HaKodesh, but during Ezra's time they switched it to Ksav Ashuris and Lashon Arami.
Is that the
It's usually called
Is that right?
Ksav
It looks
Huh?
like the English.
Is it Dalet a delta like in Greek or am I?
Yeah, you see like an A and a B.
Dalet.
Yeah.
Some of this, so there, look, right? You can
Yeah.
see some of the
ion.
right? Aleph and A sideways, right? So you could see the Phoenician alphabet is influenced, right? This influenced from this, right? Let me just turn my page here,
Interesting.
right?
And Y and Vav are happen to be the same letter in. Is that right? Yeah.
Now, this is where you start to realize that pronunciations between Ashkenazim and Sephardim and things have some original sources. I wonder, right, if an O is at the end of a word, if you're Ashkenazi, oi, right? Whether there's a rationale, whether there's a connection to those some of those sounds.
For example.
Yeah, but that's because they're reading it properly. But I just, right, because it's a chat of pad. Anyway, but the point is, right, that some of these letters do, there's, right, the letters seem to align with some of the things that with what we had. So okay, so now.
But it's interesting because all the mystical significance, it's usually related to the new one, the new alphabet.
The Ksav Ashuris, right?
Yeah.
Now everything's written in Ksav Ashuris. And what are we saying? That if I went archaeologically and I dug up Moshe Rabbeinu's Sefer Torah, it would be written in different letters? Yeah. And what gives us the right, Ezra, suddenly to change the Sefer Torah? Does that bother everybody, right? We have this whole concept of that our tradition is if I have one letter wrong or something, huh?
He changed it anyways. He created spaces, right? Did he not in the Torah? Like there was no space whatsoever in the Sefer Torah, and then he spaced it out. That's what I heard. He's the one who broke it up into parshas. Did he not?
He broke to parshios. Yes. In other words, the sections that we read each week. Not that there's spaces, but he
Right.
He told us.
The Zohar has a lot of interpretation of each letter.
Yes.
The letter.
It's not.
And it's not this.
No.
Right.
It's amazing. Okay. So hang on. We can't stop the Gemara so too early, right? Wow. Okay. So now the Lashon Arami Biru Lahen Yisrael, and so Biru Lahen Yisrael, the Jewish people chose Ksav Ashuris for the Lashon HaKodesh, and we wound up just sticking with Ksav Ashuris and Lashon HaKodesh. So that's what we wound up with today. Ve'inichu lehedyotos Ksav Ivris. And the regular people, they got the Ksav Ivris. So that's why, a good explanation, why you still had people using the Ksav Ivris, right, this Ksav, as the general folk were using. This was more for holy writing. The Ksav Ashuris became for holy writing and not for other purposes.
This is not what we're used to reading. Though. We're not used to reading this Ksav, though.
We're not used to it, right? So my hedyotos, who are these hedyotos? I'm Rav Chisda Kivasai, people like us, right? That's what we were using, right? We were people like us, meaning the regular Talmidei Chachamim writing their Sfarim and back and forth. Ksav Ashuris was for the holy Sfarim. Okay, so now my Ksav Ivris. What is this Ksav Ivris? I'm Rav Chisda Ksav Li Bo Noah. This Ksav Ivris, right? There's.
Sorry.
Yes.
Just one point. The Art Scroll says for the kutai, like for the kutim.
Yes, so that's a lashon. That was for the. Oh, sorry, kavasai. I read it wrong. It's kutai. Thank you. That is correct. Ksav. He says ksav ivris was for the kutai. The kusim used this language. Yeah. So, and he says, so what is the Ksav Ivris that the Kutaim use? Thank you. That is the Libonoa script. And in my in that podcast on the history of Daf Yomi, so Rabbi Abramson, right? That's Dr. said that it says that it is the Samaritan script. And if you go to the Kuthians nowadays, they have a Samaritan script. I didn't print that one out because that was just mentioned in the Gemara. But they have a separate script, a third script, not the Ivri, not the Ashuris, but an Ivris script, which is the one that they use. Okay, and that is what they were using. Tanya, we learned a Brayser. Rabbi Yossi says, Roy Haya Ezra Shetinasin Torah Al Yadoli Yisrael. So now we're going to go and discuss this whole circumstance situation. Rabbi Yossi says that Ezra could have been worthy of giving the Torah to the Jewish people. Il Mole Kadmu Moshe, if it wasn't for the fact that Moshe came before him. By Moshe it says, Moshe Allah Elohim, Moshe went up to Hashemayim, and by Ezra, and in Ezra it says, Omer Hu Ezra Allah Mi Bavel, Ezra went up from Bavel. Ma'aliyah Ha'amor Kan Torah Af Aliyah Ha'amor Laholan Torah, just like Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Torah, so to Ezra gave the Torah. Moshe it says, Velsitziva Hashem Ba'esahi L'lamed Eschem, that I was commanded at that point in order to teach you Chukim Mishpatim, the laws, the Chukim and the both types of laws. But Ezra, who Omer Ezra says the same thing. Ki Ezra, Heichin Levavo Lidrosas Torah Hashem La'asos Lamed B'Yisrael Chok Umishpat. Again, you see the Chok Umishpat. Ezra is teaching again. Mi'afapi Shalin in the Torah Al Yado, and even though Ezra did not give the Torah, so Nishtana al Yado Haksav, the writing of the Torah was changed by Ezra. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Uksav Hanishtivan Kosuv Aramis Umatorgam Aramis. This is in Ezra. It says that the changed script was written in Aramis and translated in Aramis. Let me explain what Aramis is. That Aramis is the Ashuris letters that we're going to see. Uksiv. Then it says, Lo keholin kisva lemikra upshara lahodo lemalka. So the question is, where did this language come from? Right? Where did this come from? The answer is that this Ksav Ashuris had a holy source, and that's why the Sifrei Kabbalah do teach everything. Why? Because this language was established during the feast of Belshazzar. Belshazzar, during the period of destruction between the first Beis Hamikdash and the second Beis Hamikdash, all of the Babylonian kings knew of the prophecy that after 70 years the Jewish people were going to come back and rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, and they were all making their calculations. So one king would start the calculation from when they began their siege. The other was when they broke through the wall. So each of the kings subsequently would make a celebration 70 years from the date they calculated. Belshazzar did that as well, and he calculated, and he said 70 years has passed, no Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, I've won.
Did Belshazzar miscalculate?
Yes, he did. So he was miscalculated, and in fact, the Beis Hamikdash, he didn't start to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash until after all the years of Achashverosh, and eventually Achashverosh's son, Daryavish, told the Bnei Yisrael they can go rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. But he's off, but in order to celebrate and point out his victory, he took all the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash out. All the Achashverosh does the same thing, right? He brings all the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash out, and he makes a big party. At the party, a floating hand appears and writes on the wall, Minei Tekel Parson, which we're going to explain. And nobody could understand what that was, nor could they understand what language it was written in. Okay? So they were not, nobody was able to explain to the king what language this was. Uksiv, because of his Mishnah Torah Zos. So then it says, so what happened was they've got this new writing that an angel came out of Shemayim and started to write on the wall, and then they've got this pasuk that says that there's this writing from the Mishnah Torah that there's going to be a second type of writing for the Torah. So Ksav Haroy Lishtanos, that means that there's going to be some new type of writing which is appropriate to change this Torah to. Lama Nikris. So therefore Ezra established that this is what the message is. We've got to take this new writing that the Malach came out of Shemayim and gave it to us, and we're going to establish that as the writing we're going to use from now on.
That's the writing on the wall?
That's the writing on the wall.
Lashon Ashuris. Lashon Arami.
Lashon Arami, Lashon Ashuris. That's correct. That's, not Lashon, but the Ksav, right? Ksav. So now, Lama Nikra Ashuris. So then if it's the Arami, so then why did they call it Ashuris? Sha'Allah imahem me Ashur. When the Jews came out of exile, they came back to Eretz Yisrael, and that's when they started to use this writing. Before that, according to this first opinion, they had Ksav Ivris before that. All their Sifrei Torah would have been written in Ksav Ivris, or so it sounds like. Tanya. So we learn in a brisa. Rabbi Omer betchila b'ksav zed nitna Torah. At first, the Torah was given with this writing, L'Yisrael. Kevan shechatu. So in other words, according to this opinion, the Torah was originally given with ksav ashuris. Okay, but they did the chet egel. Nepach lahen leroitz. So they forgot everything. Everything was not the chet. Sorry. Once they did the chet, so once they went to Bavel, they forgot all of their Torah. They weren't learning, and they forgot everything, so they couldn't even read Ksav Ashuris.
This is from Noah's time, right?
No, this is during the exile, Babylonian exile. So they did the Avera, they lost the base of Migdash, they went into exile, they didn't know their writing anymore. They weren't educated, and they weren't being educated in the writing anymore. So therefore, Kivin Shechazir Bahan Hechzir Lehem. So this opinion says, now Ezra brings them back. He retaught them Ksav Ashuris all over again. Now the Ksav Ivris, potentially, they didn't know, because they were using that Ksav as their basic writing for, as we even see in the archaeological finds and the coins and on all kinds of documents, they were using Ksav Ivris. The Ksav Ashuris was the one that they were writing their Sifrei Torah in all along. It's just that they forgot it during the Babylonian exile, and Ezra had to remind them, Shenemar Shuvu Libitzron Asirei Hatikva, Gama Yom Magid Mishnah Ashivlach. Right? So Lama Nikra Shema Ashuris. So why is it called Ashuris then? Why, if it's not the Ksav that came up with them from Ashur, Shemeusheris Shebiksav. It is the most glorious of the writings. That's what it's written. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Parta. She'amar Mishum Rabbi Elazar Hamodai, who said the name of Elazar Hamodai, Ksav zeh lo nishtane kol ikar. He says this writing never changed. This opinion says the writing never changed. It was always Ksav Ashuris all the time. Shenemar, as it says, I'll prove it to you. Vave ha'umdim, so ha'amudim, vave ha'amudim, the hooks, when it talks about the hooks in the Mishkan, in the Torah, it says, calls them vave, the hooks. Now, Ma'amudim lo nishtanu af vavim lo nishtanu. Now, the amudim, right? The hooks of the amudim, just like the pillars. I guess either the shape of the pillars we're looking is the shape of a vav, or whether it's just that they never change, so therefore the vav never changed. That's the way they look. Now, it is interesting to note that even in the ksav ivri, right, it does look like a pillar with hooks on the top. Also a little bit, but his point is that the vav looks like a straight pillar, and therefore that makes sense that it never changed. That's the way it was. Whatever they were calling a vav back then is a vav now. The Omer, and also it says, I'll give you another proof. During the time, you're going to tell me that they forgot, even according to the opinion, they forgot their language during the time that they were in exile. So it says, by the Purim story, the El HaYehudim Kichsavam Kilshonam. They wrote all of the Achashverosh's decrees to the Jewish people in their writing and in their language. So they used their language. Ma Lishonam Lo Nishtonam, just like their language never changed, and we agreed all along that they were using Lashon HaKodesh the whole time. So to their writing, never changed. Elamani Mekaimas Mishnah Torah. So how do you explain the pasuk that says Mishnah HaTorah, which we said the change in the Torah? Lishtei Toros. That is what we're bringing this in the first place for, to tell us that there were two Toros that the Melech had. One that the king carried with him at all times, and one that he kept at home. So the one that he kept with him, so he had as sort of an amulet, v'tolab is ro'o, and he would hang it around his neck. Shinamar, as it says, Shivisi Hashem lenegdi tamid. I put Hashem before me at all times. V'idach Hashivisi my darish bay. So according to the other opinion, that seems to imply that the Mishnah Torah is talking about the change in language and not about the king's second Torah. So then, what does he use this pasuk for? If the king didn't have a second Torah that wasn't with him at all times, Hahumi boyle Rav Chana bar Bizna. He needs it like Rav Chana bar Bizna says. Rav Chana bar Bizna. Rav Shimon Chasida Hamispalel. Somebody who's davening. Tzarech Shiyira Atzmo Ki'ilu Shechina Kenegdo, has to see himself as though the Shechina is before him. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, and that's why it's written right over there, right? Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid. We put that up there in order to remind us that we have to look and view ourselves like we are in front of Hashem at all times when we're davening. Reb Shimon Damar Ksav Ze Lo Nishtana Mai Lo Keholen Kisva Lemikra. So okay, fine. According to the opinion that says the language changed. And so we've got this whole explanation. Originally, we had Ksav Ivris, and then we changed it to Ksav Ashuris. So the reason why nobody was able to write it is nobody had ever seen this before. An angel came out and taught everybody a new language that they didn't see before. Potentially, Mefarshim explained, Rifra and others, we have Chazal that tell us that letters like Mem or Samech in the Luchos hung in the middle and were unsuspended. But if you take a look at a samech or an ayin, a samech or a mem, there are no mem sofis at all. But a samech doesn't have a problem with that. So therefore, the Ritva and others point out that even according to the opinion that says that originally they were using Ksav Ivris for their Sifrei Torah, the original Sifrei Torah and the Seres Dibros were clearly written in Ksav Ashuris anyway.
But the circle is the samach, right?
And the circle is the samech, but this looks like some kind of antenna over there, right? So so some changed the gear since it's the ayin that was hanging, because the ayin is the one that's a circle rather than the samech, right? So, but in any event, right? Even according to the opinion that says that, even according to the opinion that says that there was Ksav Ivris, Ksav Ashuris did have a source originally. So now, how are we going to explain, according to the opinion that says that it never changed? So then why is it that when the handwriting came on the wall, nobody could figure it out? I understand the Babylonians might not have seen this, but it's Lashon HaKodesh. Everybody should have been able to read Ksav Ashuris. It was in the Sifrei Torah. Everybody should have known it. So there could have been some Jews there that could have been able to tell what it was. So Amar Rav explains, Bigematria ichtiv lahon, yatos. He says what happens, adach pug chamt. He says what happens is that it wasn't written normally. It was written with what's called atbash, right? Atbash is Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalid, and then what we would do is we would align the Aleph Beis backwards, Tuf, Shin, Resh, Kuf, Atbash. So Aleph turns to Tuf, Beis turns to Shin, Gimel turns to Resh, Dalid turns to Kuf, and if you do that, Minei Tekel Parsin comes out as the Gemara explains, I just lost my place, as...
Machuscha?
Yeah, that's Moki the Shechina Kenegdo. Yatas, Adach, Pug, Chamt, right? So if you flip the first and last letters, right? So Yud flips with a Mem, Tes flips with a Nun, etc. Tes flips with an Aleph, and that's what that was. So my Parish Lahu, so what's the explanation of Minomina Tekel Parson? So so now we understand that they couldn't read it because it was in code, and Daniel figured out the code. So what is the explanation of this phrase anyway? Minomina Tekel Parson. So Minei Eloha Malchusach. So the first thing is, Hashem has counted, you made your calculation. Belshazzar, Hashem also counted your days. That's where the word Minei comes from. Tekel, what does Tekel means? Tekilta bimaznaya vehishkachakt chosir. Hashem has weighed you and on the scales and found you to be missing. Prisas machuscha v'yahavas lemade prasas. Hashem has separated you from the kingship and he's given it to the Medes and the Persians. You're gone. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel says, how come they couldn't read it? Because Mamtos Ninakfi A'alarin, because it was written like this. A second, write it. It was written, write it here. I keep looking down and losing my place.
Mem, Taf, Vav Samach.
Taf Vav Samach, yeah.
Nun. Kuf Fe Yud.
Aleph.
Resh, Nun Sufis.
Resh.
Lamed Resh.
Lamed.
Lamed Resh, Nun Sufis.
Okay. Resh, Nun Sufis. That. Kel. Okay. So this is what was written. So if you read it this way, you can't figure out what it means, right? But if you read it this way, Minei, Tekel, Ufarsin. Okay? And so again,
they agree on the message.
Yes, but the code was different, right? So this is the point is that it was written in that code. So it was written Mamtos Ninakfi Elron. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, it was written Anam Lekas Nisrafu, meaning backwards. All the letters were written backwards. Rav Ashi Amar Nimonima Ketel Porsin, that the first two letters were reversed. Either way, the argument is that they had some kind of code. Now, what is the rationale behind, what is the meaning behind why each of them have to explain it was a different code? That I was not able to find explanations for at this point.
Just a question. The translation of the Torah was considered one of the biggest tragedies.
Yes.
So what's happening here?
They didn't translate. They used Lashon HaKodesh. They just changed the letters.
No, they're saying each letter is just written.
Yeah, I see. The same sound.
Same sound, just different letters. Exactly. Yeah.
Can the Torah still be written in the ancient letters?
No.
Okay.
It would be puzzle. So that's what's fascinating and amazing about it is that if you wrote a Sefer Torah using
if
this,
we found an ancient Torah too, like from.
and by the way, now so this is what's interesting, right? So. The way that the Gemara comes out is, according to one opinion, is they never stopped using Ksav Ashuris. There was Ksav Ivris, which was the regular standard written language. Theoretically, and then according to the other, they did stop using it for other Sifrei Torah for a time, and then went back to it. Now, the only way to prove one way or the other is that you'd find archaeologically Sifrei Torah. It's very difficult. They don't find it. The oldest scripts are from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are after the second Beis Hamikdash time, which is in Ksav Ashuris.
But if they found,
but then this would answer our question.
Okay.
But everything.
Can we use it then?
So everything. Well, no, not now because we switched to Ksav Ashuris anyway. But what's interesting is, everything that we find in archaeology from the era of the first Beis Hamikdash would be on coins or on pottery, and they use Ksav Ivris. And that doesn't conflict with anybody, because even according to the opinion that says they were using Ksav Ashuris, they were reserving Lashon HaKodesh and Ksav Ashuris for their Sifrei Torah, and the regular language that they were using, the regular writing that they were using, they would take the regular language and they would write like this.
We don't have any coins dating back to the first base to the second base. We have coins dating to the second base. Do we use Ksav Ashuris?
So I will say, I saw online when I was looking up these things, and I was going to print some out, but it was hard to read them when you print them out anyway. Coins from the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which is at the end of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, and they were still using Ksav Ivris.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So
Ksav Ivris was. It disappeared in use, but it was even in the second Beis Hamikdash time they were still using it for regular writing. The Bar Kokhba rebellion was written David HaMelech's time they were using. If you go to David HaMelech, if you go to Ir David, where they're doing the archaeological dig, they write Ir David using this. The Israelis, that's the sign that says Ir David. They use this script in order to announce it, so that you can get used to the idea that you're walking into this. This is the Hebrew language that you're walking into, but it didn't stop. It didn't stop.
If you go to Greece, you find the type of writing in Greece as well, no?
This is not Greek writing. This is not Greek. Yeah.
But it looks English too. Look at the A.
Yeah.
Look at the B. Look at the D.
E.
The Dalet. The Aleph, the base, the Dalet, they're very similar. But they look like Greek, it looks like Russian too.
Yeah.
It looks like...
It's all Greek to me.
So the Ksav Ashuris is reserved for Torah.
Yeah. So that's it seems like Ksav Ashuris, even later on in the second Beis Hamikdash time, it seems like it looked like it was reserved for the Torah.
And I was going to say, by the way, because you have Sefer Yetzirah talks about the letters, but it talks about Ksav Ashuris. And Sefer Yetzirah is supposed to be written during the time by Avram Avinu, or even some people say Adam. So